I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was the kind of thing that shouldn't have mattered. A name, a face from years ago, a kid she probably only saw in passing when I used to hang around her son. But when she said it, casually, like it had been waiting on the tip of her tongue the whole time, it hit me harder than it should have. "Ethan," she said, stepping aside to let me into the hallway. "You're taller than I remember." Her voice was calm, not surprised, not forced, just certain. I stood there with my backpack strap clenched in my fist like I didn't know what to do with my hands. The apartment building smelled like laundry detergent and old carpet. Somewhere above us, a TV was on too loud. "I guess people grow," I said. She smiled like that was a dumb answer, but she didn't call it dumb. She just watched me for a second longer than necessary. Then she turned and started walking down the hall, heels tapping softly against the floor. "Come on," she said. "The laundry room's open." That was why I was there. Not to see her. Not to feel this weird tightening in my chest. Just laundry. I moved into the building 2 months ago because it was cheap and close enough to the editing studio I occasionally freelance for. It wasn't a bad place. Just quiet in a way that made you notice your own footsteps. And she ran the place. Or managed it. Or owned it. I didn't know. I just knew her name was Mrs. Carter. And that she was my friend's mom. Well, my old friend. The kind you lose without a fight. The kind you don't even realize you lost until years later. I hadn't seen Jason since graduation. Not college graduation, high school. Back when my biggest problem was whether my phone would buzz on a Friday night. Now my phone stayed silent most days. Not because nobody cared, just because life gets busy. People get married. People move. People forget you. I did my laundry on Wednesday nights because nobody else did. The machines were always empty, and I liked the way the hum filled the room. It made it feel less like I was alone. Mrs. Carter, Linda, I remembered suddenly, unlocked the laundry room door with a key from her ring and pushed it open. The fluorescent light flickered once. She stepped in like she belonged to the building in a way I never would. I followed her inside, holding my bag against my hip. "Still doing everything last minute," she said, glancing at the overflowing laundry bag. "Some things never change." I laughed, but it came out smaller than I wanted. "You remember that?" I asked. She bent down, opened a dryer, checked inside like she was inspecting it. "You used to show up at our house with the same backpack. Always stuffed, like you were carrying bricks." "That was my entire personality," I said. That made her smile again. But this one was softer. She reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It wasn't a flirtatious move. It was practical, like she didn't even know she was doing it. But I noticed her hands, not in a creepy way, just in the way you notice something quiet and human. Her fingers were long, a little dry around the knuckles. The kind of hands that had done work. Cooking, cleaning, paying bills, holding people together. The kind of hands that had lived. I looked away fast, suddenly aware of my own cheap hoodie, my messy hair, the tiredness under my eyes that never went away anymore. "You live alone?" she asked. The question wasn't intrusive. It was said like she already knew the answer and just wanted to hear how I'd say it. "Yeah," I said. "Just me." She nodded once, like she'd expected it. Then she walked to the folding table and ran her palm across the surface, brushing off invisible dust. The gesture felt intimate in a strange way, like she was making space. "You eat enough?" she asked, not looking at me. I almost laughed again, but my throat tightened. "Probably not," I admitted. She paused. "That also hasn't changed." I dumped my clothes into a washer and reached for detergent, but my hands hesitated. I realized I didn't know where I'd put it. I checked my bag. Nothing. I froze for a second, embarrassed, like a kid caught unprepared. She noticed immediately. Without a word, she opened the cabinet above the sink and pulled out a bottle of detergent. "Here," she said, handing it to me. I took it carefully, our fingers brushing for half a second. It wasn't electric. It wasn't dramatic. But it was warm, and I hated how much I felt it. "Thanks," I said quietly. She didn't answer right away, just leaned back against the wall and watched me pour detergent like it was something worth paying attention to. The silence stretched. Not awkward, just full. I cleared my throat. "So, Jason's still around." Her eyes flicked up, then away. Like the name was a door she didn't open often. Not really, she said. He calls sometimes. Sometimes. The way she said it made it sound like an excuse. I nodded slowly, staring at the spinning water in the machine. And then she said it. Softly. Almost like she wasn't sure she should. You're not the boy you used to be. I looked at her. She was watching me now. Really watching. Not judging. Just noticing. Like she could see the tired parts of me I didn't even talk about. I tried to joke my way out of it. Is that good or bad? Linda's lips pressed together. She looked down at my hands gripping the detergent bottle. Then she said, almost to herself, I don't know yet. And before I could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted. Something unreadable. Then she looked at me again. Ethan, she said, voice quieter than before. Can I ask you something? I nodded, even though my stomach tightened. She hesitated, then turned the screen slightly toward me. A missed call. Time, 1:37 a.m. from her own number. And underneath it, a draft message that hadn't been sent. I shouldn't be thinking about you. For a second, I thought she was joking. Like maybe she'd accidentally called herself half asleep, and the message was some weird glitch. But Linda didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. She just stared at the screen like it was a bruise she didn't remember getting. I didn't, she murmured, then stopped. Her fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't write that. I didn't know what to say. So I did what I always do when something gets too emotional. I try to make it smaller. Maybe your phone's haunted, I said. She let out a short breath. Not a laugh, not exactly. Something in between. Like her body wanted to release tension, but didn't know how. It's not haunted, she said. It's just old. She slid the phone back in her pocket, but the air didn't go back to normal. It stayed stretched like a thin wire pulled too tight. I pretended to focus on the washing machine. The clothes swirled in a dull gray loop. It was weird how something as stupid as a missed call could make a room feel dangerous. Linda walked to the folding table again and sat on the edge of it. She crossed one leg over the other, slowly, like she had all the time in the world. But her hands gave her away. She kept smoothing her skirt, over and over, as if the fabric had wrinkles only she could see. You live in 3B, right? She asked. Yeah, I thought so. She nodded. You're quieter than most people. That shouldn't have sounded like a compliment, but it did. I shrugged. I'm just tired a lot. She looked at me, and for the first time her eyes softened in a way that felt personal. Tired doesn't usually look like that, she said. I swallowed. Like what? She hesitated, like she almost regretted saying anything. Then she leaned forward slightly. Like someone who's always waiting for something to happen, she said. I didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong, and I didn't like how easily she'd guessed it. The machine hummed. A dryer clicked somewhere in the back. Linda's gaze drifted to my hands. I realized I was still holding the detergent bottle like it was something important. I set it down quietly. You know, she said, you used to talk more. That made me smile without meaning to. Yeah, I used to think everything I said mattered. And now, I looked at the washer door. Now I think if I say the wrong thing, it'll just make everything worse. Linda nodded like she understood that too well. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stood up and walked to the small cabinet by the sink. She opened it and pulled out 2 paper cups and a little box of tea bags. I blinked. You keep tea in the laundry room. I get cold, she said simply, and people complain about the vending machine. She filled the electric kettle, plugged it in, and waited. The whole thing felt domestic in a way that didn't belong here. Like she was turning this ugly laundry room into a small corner of safety. When she handed me a cup, our fingers touched again. This time, neither of us pulled away quickly. Her skin was warm, not soft. Warm in the way that meant she was real. Thanks, I said. She nodded and took a sip. Her eyes stayed on me over the rim of the cup. I tried not to stare, but it was hard not to notice how different she looked up close. Not younger, not older, just settled. The kind of woman who had survived things. Jason used to drink tea like that, I said suddenly, without thinking. Like he was 80. Linda's mouth twitched. He got that from his father. There was something sharp in the way she said father. A little crack in her voice she didn't fix. I shouldn't have asked, but I did anyway. Is he still around? Linda's gaze dropped to her cup. No, she said. Not for years. Divorced, I realized. Or worse, she didn't say the word. She didn't need to. The silence after that was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Just honest. I could feel my brain trying to do the math. Her son was my age. She was mid-40s, maybe older. She'd known me when I was a kid with scraped knees and stupid jokes. This wasn't supposed to be anything, and yet my chest felt tight in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I imagined her in her apartment upstairs. Alone. Quiet. The kind of loneliness that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. I hated that my mind went there. I hated that part of me wanted to know what her living room smelled like. Linda set her cup down and stood close to me, reaching past my shoulder to open the dryer behind me. Her arm brushed mine. A small accident, but it landed like a confession. She didn't move away right away. Instead, she leaned in slightly, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something clean like soap and warm fabric. Then, without looking at me, she said softly, almost teasing, "You still fold your shirts wrong." I blinked. What? She finally looked at me, and her eyes held mine for one long second. "I used to watch you do it at our house," she said. "Jason never cared, but you did." I laughed under my breath, shaking my head, and she smiled, but wasn't playful. It was fond, like she'd been carrying that memory longer than she should have. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Then she reached out, gently, and fixed the collar of my hoodie. Just a quick, simple gesture, the kind a mother might do. But her fingers lingered half a second too long. And when she pulled her hand back, her thumb grazed my jaw, so light it could have been nothing. Except it wasn't, because she looked at me after. Not like Jason's mom, not like my landlord, like a woman who had just realized she was standing too close and didn't want to step away. After that night, the laundry room stopped feeling like a laundry room. It felt like a place where something could happen. And that thought followed me upstairs, into my apartment, into my bed. It sat on my chest while I tried to sleep, like a quiet weight I didn't know how to move. The next morning, I woke up to a notification. A text from an unknown number. "Linda, did you get your clothes dried? You forgot your hoodie downstairs." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I hadn't forgotten it. I remembered exactly where it was. I remembered her hand on the collar, the way she'd fixed it like she had permission, like she'd done it before. I typed back, "Yeah, sorry, I'll come get it later." Then I deleted that message. Typed again, "Thanks, I'll grab it when I'm back." Deleted again. In the end, I just wrote, "Okay," because okay was safe. Okay didn't sound like I cared, but I did. I cared in a way that made me uncomfortable with myself. That afternoon, I went downstairs, half expecting the laundry room to be empty. It wasn't. Linda was there, sitting on the folding table again, holding my hoodie in her lap like she'd been waiting. She looked up when I entered. No smile this time. Just a quiet look, like she'd been thinking too. "Hey," I said. "Hey." Her voice was normal. Too normal. I walked over, trying to act casual. Trying to act like I hadn't replayed her thumb brushing my jaw all night. "Thanks," I said, reaching for the hoodie. She didn't hand it over immediately. Her fingers tightened on the fabric. Then she finally passed it to me, slow. Our hands touched again. This time, she pulled away fast, like she'd burned herself. I noticed it. Of course I did. I pretended I didn't. I draped the hoodie over my arm and leaned against the wall, giving her space. The kettle was there again. 2 cups on the counter, like she'd already made the decision. But she didn't offer me one. Instead, she stared down at her phone. "I shouldn't have," she started, then stopped. I waited. Her jaw flexed once, like she was biting down on the rest of the sentence. "I shouldn't have texted you," she said finally. My stomach tightened. "It's fine," I said quickly. "It's just a hoodie." She looked up. Her eyes held mine for half a second too long. "That's not what I meant," she said. The air went quiet. The dryer behind us clicked, over and over, like it was counting something down. I swallowed. "Linda." She flinched slightly at her name, like hearing it from me made it too real. "Don't," she said, softer now. Not angry, just scared. I didn't move. I didn't step closer, but my body wanted to. That was the problem. I wanted to. She stood up, turning away, walking toward the sink. She ran water, even though she wasn't washing anything, just letting it run. A stupid distraction. I watched her back. The way her shoulders rose with each breath. Controlled, careful, like she was holding herself together with thread. I'm not, she began, and her voice broke slightly. She cleared her throat. I'm not the kind of woman who does this. Does what? I asked, and my voice came out too quiet. She turned off the water and faced me again. Her eyes looked tired now, tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. You were my son's friend, she said. I watched you eat cereal in my kitchen. I drove you boys to the movies. I knew you when you were a kid. I finished. She nodded once, like saying it out loud hurt. I should have backed off. I should have said something mature, something respectful, something that let her breathe again. But the truth was, nobody had looked at me the way she did in a long time. Not like I mattered. Not like I was seen. I'm not a kid anymore, I said. The words hung there, too heavy. Linda's gaze dropped to my mouth for a split second. Then she looked away like she hated herself for it. Her hand went to her necklace. A simple chain. She kept rubbing the small pendant between her fingers, over and over, like it was the only thing anchoring her. I know, she whispered. That's what scares me. I didn't realize I'd stepped closer until I was close enough to feel the heat of her body. Not touching, just near, the kind of near that makes your heart beat louder. She didn't step back, but she didn't step forward either. We stood there, frozen between wrong and inevitable. Then the door creaked open. A voice filled the laundry room. Mom. Both of us snapped back like we'd been caught stealing something. Linda's face drained of color, and my heart dropped so fast it felt like falling. Jason stood in the doorway. Older now, broader, a little tired around the eyes. But it was him. His gaze moved from me to Linda, to the space between us. And for a second, nobody spoke. Not because we didn't have words, because any word would have admitted the truth. Jason's mouth twitched like he was trying to place me. Then his eyes narrowed. Ethan, he said, like my name tasted strange. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Yeah, I said. Hey. Linda didn't move. She just stood there, hands clenched at her sides, breathing shallowly. Jason stepped in slowly. I didn't know you lived here, he said. I didn't know you were in town, I answered. His eyes flicked back to his mom again. And I saw it. Not suspicion exactly. Just a question. A feeling. Something starting to form. Linda cleared her throat too fast. I was just helping him, she said. He forgot his hoodie. Jason stared at the hoodie draped over my arm. Then he gave a small nod. Right, he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. He turned to Linda. You ready? He asked. Linda hesitated. Her eyes met mine, and in them was something raw, something unspoken, something like an apology. She walked past me, close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm. A sauf accident, but her fingers grazed my wrist as she passed. Just once. Just enough. Like she couldn't stop herself. And when she reached the door, she paused, just for a heartbeat, like she wanted to look back. But she didn't. Jason followed her out. The door shut behind them. The laundry room fell silent again. Only the dryer clicking. Only my pulse in my ears. And the worst part, the line was right there. We had almost crossed it. And now, I didn't know if I wanted to run from it, or if I wanted her to come back and finish what we both refused to start. After Jason showed up, everything changed without anything technically changing. Linda stopped coming down on Wednesdays. The tea disappeared from the cabinet. The paper cups were gone. The kettle, too, like she'd erased the whole little world we'd accidentally built together. And I told myself that was the right thing, that she'd come to her senses, that she'd remembered what she was supposed to be, a mother, a landlord, a woman who knew better. But the truth was, I didn't feel relieved. I felt abandoned in a way I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding pathetic. So I did what lonely people do. I filled the silence with routines. Work, grocery store, gym I barely used, late-night edits on my laptop while the city outside my window stayed awake without me. Sometimes I opened my phone and scrolled to her messages. There weren't many. Just okay. Just don't forget your key. Just package arrived for you. But every time I read them, I felt the ghost of her standing too close. One night, around 10, I went downstairs to throw out trash. The hallway was dim, quiet. The building always felt like it was holding its breath after dark. And then I saw her. Linda was outside, sitting on the front steps, wrapped in a thin cardigan like she'd stepped out in a hurry. A small paper bag sat beside her. Her car keys were in her hand, but she wasn't going anywhere. She was just there, like she didn't trust herself to be alone upstairs. I stopped a few feet away. "Hey," I said softly. She looked up. Her face was calm, but her eyes weren't. The streetlight caught the tiredness in them. "Hi," she answered. I held up the trash bag awkwardly, like it explained my presence. "I was just taking this out. I figured." Her voice was flat but not cold. I hesitated, then stepped closer and dropped the trash in the bin. When I turned back, she was still watching me. Not the way she used to. This time, it felt like she was watching herself through me. I sat down on the step below her without asking, leaving space between us, enough to pretend we weren't doing anything wrong. The air smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. Linda's hands kept moving, turning her keys over, then over again, metal clicking softly in the quiet. "You're avoiding the laundry room," I said. She let out a slow breath through her nose. "Yeah, because of Jason." Her jaw tightened at his name. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Because of me." That hit harder than it should have. I leaned back, staring at the empty street. A car passed in the distance, headlights briefly painting us in white. "I didn't mean to make things weird," I said. Linda gave a short, humorless smile. "You didn't." She paused. "You just exist." And somehow that was enough. My throat went dry. I glanced up at her, and she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the sidewalk, like it was safer than my face. "You know what Jason said to me?" she asked. I didn't like where this was going, but I asked anyway. "What?" Linda swallowed. "He asked if you were still the same kid who used to sleep on our couch after playing video games." Her fingers tightened around the keys. "He said, 'Mom, isn't that weird?'" I exhaled a quiet laugh, but it died quickly. "Yeah," I said. "It's weird." Linda's head turned sharply toward me. Her eyes were suddenly bright. Not with tears, with anger, or fear, or something that had been building in her chest for too long. "Don't say it like that," she whispered. I blinked. "Like what?" "Like you don't feel it," she said. "Like you're not standing on the edge of something." My heart started beating faster. I stared at her profile, the way her hair moved slightly in the night breeze. "I do feel it," I admitted. She laughed quietly then, but sounded broken. "That's the problem," she said. "I keep thinking maybe you're just lonely. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you want to prove something." I swallowed hard. "And you?" I asked. Linda didn't answer. Her fingers stopped moving. The keys went still. She turned to me slowly, like the movement cost her something. "I'm not supposed to want anything," she said. "Not anymore." My chest tightened. "Who told you that?" She looked at me then. Really looked. And her voice came out softer, almost shaking. "Life did." I didn't know what to say. So I did the stupidest thing. The honest thing. I reached out and touched her hand. Just the back of it. Light. Like I was asking permission without words. Linda didn't pull away, but her breathing changed. Shallow. Unsteady. Her eyes dropped to my fingers on her skin, and for a second she looked like she might cry. Then she whispered, barely audible, "You don't understand what you're doing to me." I leaned closer without thinking. Not enough to kiss her, just enough that my voice could live in the space between us. "Then tell me," I said. Linda's lips parted slightly. She looked up at me, and there was something in her face that felt like surrender, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally couldn't anymore. Her hand turned under mine, slowly, and her fingers wrapped around my wrist, not pushing me away, holding me there. Her thumb pressed once against my pulse, like she was checking if I was real. Then she whispered the question that sat under everything, the question that could ruin both of us. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" And I realized in that quiet space on the steps, with the night wrapped around us, if I answered honestly, there would be no going back. I didn't answer her. Not because I didn't know, because the moment I said it out loud, it would stop being a feeling and turn into a decision. And decisions have consequences. Linda stared at me, her fingers still wrapped around my wrist. I could feel her thumb pressing lightly against my pulse, like she was listening to something she didn't trust. Then she let go, slowly, like she was putting something down before it shattered. She stood up without a word. I followed her movement with my eyes, confused, still sitting on the step like an idiot. Linda, she shook her head. Not angry, not even disappointed, just shutting a door quietly. I shouldn't have asked that, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She slid her keys into her cardigan pocket, like she needed them hidden. I stood up too fast. No, you should have. You just... She looked at me then, and her eyes were wet. Not crying, just full. I know what you're about to say, she whispered. And I can't hear it. The words hit me like cold water. Why? I asked. Linda exhaled, and for a second she looked older than she really was. Like the night had pulled years out of her. Because you're not a mistake I can afford, she said. Then she walked past me, up the stairs, her footsteps quiet but fast. And just like that, she was gone. The next day, I didn't see her. Or the next. I started checking the hallway every time I left my apartment, like maybe she'd appear with that tired half-smile and act like nothing happened. But Linda wasn't around. The office door downstairs stayed locked. No footsteps, no voice, no Ethan spoken like it meant something. Even the building felt different, colder, like it was punishing me for hoping. By Friday, I couldn't stand it. I went downstairs, stood outside her apartment door, and stared at it like it might open on its own. My fist lifted, hovered. I didn't knock. I told myself I was being respectful. But the truth was I was scared. Scared she'd answer and look at me like I'd imagined everything. Or worse, scared she wouldn't answer at all. So I went back upstairs, and I hated myself for the relief I felt when I reached my door. A week passed, then another. Jason's car showed up twice, parked out front like a warning. I saw him carrying groceries into the building one night. He glanced at me, gave me a quick nod, like we were old acquaintances pretending we weren't strangers now. He didn't mention his mom. I didn't mention the laundry room. We both avoided the same invisible landmine. But the weirdest part, Linda stopped texting me. Not even about rent reminders. Not even about packages. Nothing. It was like I'd become invisible again. And it messed with my head more than I wanted to admit. Because it made me wonder if she'd felt anything at all, or if I'd just been a temporary distraction from her own loneliness. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat at my desk staring an unfinished timeline for a client video. The screen glowed blue in my dark apartment. My phone was in my hand. My thumb hovered over her contact. I typed, "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then I erased it. Typed again, "I can't stop thinking about you." Erased. Typed again, "I miss talking to you." Erased. The cursor blinked at me like it was disappointed. Finally, I wrote, "Are you okay?" That was safe. That was human. That was something a friend would ask. I stared at it for a long time. Then I didn't send it. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence fill the room. And in that silence, my mind started doing what it always did, connecting dots that weren't supposed to connect. Why had she really pulled away? Because of the age gap? Because of Jason? Or because she knew something about herself that I didn't? The answer came the next morning. I was walking out of the building when I saw her across the street, standing beside a man near a parked car. A tall man, older, clean coat, familiar posture. He handed her a small box. She didn't smile, but she didn't step away either. She looked tired in the way someone looks when they're losing a fight they didn't start. Then the man reached out and touched her shoulder. Not affectionately, possessively. Linda's eyes flicked up, and for a second, she looked straight at me. Her face went still, like she hadn't expected to be seen, like she hadn't expected me to exist in the same morning. The man turned and followed her gaze. He looked at me too. His expression didn't change, but something in it felt like a warning. Linda said something to him. I couldn't hear it. Then she turned and walked toward the car. Before she got in, she looked back at me one more time. Not with longing, not with guilt, with something worse. Fear. And then she got in. The car door shut, and they drove away. I stood there with my keys in my hand, the cold air cutting into my lungs. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. She didn't come back that day, or the next. 3 days passed, and the building felt like it was holding its breath the same way I was. I kept expecting to hear her heels in the hallway, kept expecting the elevator to open and her voice to call my name like nothing had happened. But all I heard was the normal stuff. Doors closing, pipes groaning, a couple arguing quietly in 2A. Life continuing like it didn't care who was falling apart inside it. On the fourth night, I got a note under my door. Not a text, not an email. A physical note, folded once, like she didn't trust technology with whatever this was. No name, no apology. Just 2 words written in neat handwriting. Come down. My chest tightened so fast, I had to sit on the edge of my bed for a second. Then I stood up, pulled on my hoodie, and walked out before I could talk myself out of it. The hallway lights buzzed faintly. My footsteps felt too loud, like the whole building could hear what I was about to do. When I reached her door, it was already open, just a crack. Warm light spilled out into the hallway. I knocked once anyway. Soft. Linda opened it wider and stepped back without speaking. She looked different. Not dressed up. Not trying. Just real. Her hair was loosely tied back. She wore an old sweater and jeans. No perfume. No lipstick. Her eyes were tired, but clear. Like she'd been crying earlier and decided not to hide it. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she answered. Her voice was quiet, careful. I stepped inside. Her apartment smelled like tea and laundry detergent. Familiar in a way that made my throat sting. The living room was small, but neat. A blanket folded on the couch. A framed photo of Jason on a shelf. He was younger in it, smiling wide, his arm around Linda's shoulders. I didn't look too long. Linda closed the door behind me, then stood there with her hand still on the knob like she might open it again and tell me to leave. But she didn't. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, and I followed. The kitchen light was too bright. The table had 2 mugs already waiting. Of course it did. She poured hot water into both like it was just another night. Like she hadn't disappeared. Like she hadn't stood across the street with a man who looked like he owned her past. She slid 1 mug toward me. I sat down. She stayed standing. Her hands gripped the counter edge. White knuckles. I waited. Linda stared at the sink, then finally spoke. "That was my ex-husband," she said. I nodded slowly. I figured. Her jaw tightened at the word figured, like it made her feel exposed. "He's back," she continued. "Not to fix things. Not for Jason." She paused, swallowing. "He's back because he lost his job. And suddenly he remembers he has a family." I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. "I'm sorry." Linda let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for years. "I didn't want you to see that," she said. "I did," I replied quietly. She looked at me then. Her eyes were sharp, almost angry. "Why didn't you send me a message?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I blinked. "What?" Her voice rose slightly, not loud, just strained. "You stood there and watched. And then you went back upstairs, and you disappeared too." Her hands moved now, restless. "You didn't knock. You didn't ask. I didn't want to pressure you," I said. Linda laughed once, bitter and small. "You think this is pressure," she said. "Ethan, I have lived through real pressure." The room went quiet again. I stared down at my mug, watching the steam curl upward. My voice came out rough. "I didn't know what I was allowed to be to you," I admitted. Linda's expression softened, just a little. She pulled out the chair across from me and finally sat down. The distance between us was only a table, but it felt like a decade. "I pulled away because I got scared," she said. "Not of you, of myself." I swallowed hard. "Linda," she shook her head gently. "No, let me say it." I nodded. She looked down at her hands, and I saw it. Her fingers trembling slightly, like she was holding something fragile inside her chest. "I don't get to be impulsive," she whispered. "I don't get to want things. Because when I want something, it always costs someone else." My heart clenched. "Who?" I asked softly. Linda's eyes lifted to mine. "Jason," she said. The name sat between us like a locked door. I nodded slowly. "I know." Linda leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice quieter now. "And you," she said. "It would cost you too. You don't even know yet how cruel people can be about things like this." I laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it was true. "I'm already lonely," I said. "So I don't think I'm afraid of that." Linda's eyes flickered. Something broke in them. And for the first time, she reached across the table. Not fast, not dramatic, just slowly like she was testing the air. Her fingers touched mine. Warm, real. I think about you more than I should, she admitted. My throat tightened. Me too. Linda closed her eyes for a second, like she was absorbing the weight of her own words. Then she opened them again and looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I'm not offering you anything either. I nodded, my fingers curling gently around hers. I know. Her thumb brushed my knuckle. A tiny movement, but it felt like a decision. She whispered, almost ashamed, I just didn't want to pretend you meant nothing. I stared at her, and my voice came out softer than I expected. You don't mean nothing, I said. Linda's lips trembled into the smallest smile. Not happy, not relieved, just human. She squeezed my hand once, and in that squeeze, everything we hadn't said sat quietly between us. Then she whispered the only word that felt safe enough to end the night without breaking it. Okay. And somehow, that was the loudest thing either of us had said. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be, just because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the way her fingers felt wrapped around mine, like she was holding on to something she'd been denying for years. I checked my phone. No message. And somehow, that didn't hurt. It felt right. Like we'd finally stopped trying to rush ourselves into a story we weren't ready to live out loud. Life didn't suddenly become romantic after that night. It became quieter, more careful, more real. Linda didn't avoid the laundry room anymore, but she didn't wait for me there either. She'd come down when she needed to, nod politely, ask about rent like she always had. But now, sometimes, she'd pause before walking away, just long enough for her eyes to meet mine. Just long enough to say something without saying it. Jason came around less after that. I never asked why. Linda never explained. But I noticed she stopped flinching at the sound of a car outside. I noticed she started breathing like she had more space in her own life. Weeks passed, then a month. The seasons shifted quietly the way they always do. One day the air was cold, the next day it wasn't. And somewhere in that time, Linda and I found a rhythm that didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like belonging. It started small. A knock on my door at 8:47 a.m. on a Saturday. I opened it, still half asleep, hair messy, wearing an old t-shirt. Linda stood there holding 2 paper cups. I made coffee, she said. Her voice was casual, like it was nothing. But her eyes were soft. Black, she added, holding 1 cup out. The way you pretend you like it. I blinked, then laughed quietly. You remember that? Linda shrugged. I remember more than I should. I took the cup, and our fingers brushed. This time, she didn't pull away. She stepped inside, not like a guest, like someone who'd finally stopped asking herself if she was allowed to be here. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, the same one I ate microwave dinners at, the same one I edited videos at late at night. Linda looked around my apartment like she was seeing the shape of my loneliness for the first time. And instead of pitying it, she softened it. She started bringing tea sometimes. I started buying honey because she liked it. She started leaving little things in my fridge, leftover soup, sliced lemons, bread that didn't taste like cardboard. I started fixing things around her place without being asked. A luz cabinage, a light that flickered in the hallway. The lock on the laundry room door that always stuck. We didn't label anything. We didn't sit down and decide what we were. We just kept showing up. And the strangest part was, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like returning. One evening, I found her sitting on the front steps again. Same cardigan, same tired posture. But this time, she scooted over without a word. I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved away. The street was quiet. The air smelled like rain again. Linda stared at the empty road and said softly, "He signed the papers." I didn't ask who. I just nodded. Her fingers found mine, slow and natural, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I feel guilty, she admitted. I squeezed her hand gently. I know. She turned her head slightly toward me. But I also feel her voice trailed off. I waited. She swallowed. Less alone, she finished. That word hit me harder than any love confession ever could. Because it was honest. Because it was earned. I leaned in and kissed her temple. Small, quiet, not demanding anything. Linda closed her eyes like she'd been waiting years for someone to do that gently. When she opened them again, she gave me the smallest smile. The kind of smile that doesn't promise forever. Just tonight. Just here. Just us. And I realized something then. This wasn't the kind of love people post about. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clean. But it was warm. It was the kind of love that shows up with tea and black coffee. The kind that fixes a broken door instead of making a speech. The kind that sits beside you on a step and doesn't ask you to explain why you're tired. Linda rested her head lightly against my shoulder. And in that moment, I finally understood what she meant weeks ago in the laundry room. I really wasn't the boy I used to be. Because the boy I used to be would have chased excitement. But the man I was becoming, he just wanted peace. And somehow, sitting there with her, feeling her hand in mine, listening to the quiet night, I realized peace had a name. And she'd been carrying it all along.